And so I want to share an example. I want to kind of bring this whole overview to a close and take you to Galway, Ireland. A good friend of mine, Gene Brown, launched a company up there called the City Bin Company. At the time, 60 employees in 2010, not doing anything high tech. They are hauling trash. And by the way, they're in one of the worst economies at that time, one of the pig countries being Ireland. And so things were tough. But Gene had heard about our course, made the trip to the United States, and attended this equivalent 2.5-day program that you are dialed into yourselves, and came out of it and said, look, first of all, what we need, even though we're in the depths of this kind of great recession, right now, all I'm trying to do is make payroll every Friday, is we need a goal. And so he made a bold decision that in 2010, that by 2020, he wanted to have 1 million customers. Now, I want to put this in perspective. There's only about 70,000 people in all of Galway. There's only 100,000 households in all of Dublin. I mean, if he had 100% market share of all of Ireland, he'd be lucky to have close to 1 million. And no one in this industry is going to have that kind of domination. And so he knew he was going to have to get not only out of Ireland, but through Europe and maybe even through the Middle East. This was a big, hairy, audacious goal. Now, once he had that set, now it was time to start the climb. And so, again, to be honest, the first then 24 months was really just trying to survive. Then at about 2012, first quarter, things started to turn around, both in the economy, he was starting to get some momentum, and he realized now it was time for him to get much more precise about what was the critical number, the game that they were going to play every 90 days. And so the key question is, where was the constraint? That's why you always want to come back to that fundamental idea. And he said, the real key constraint next is cash flow. There are some things I need to do now to grow and expand this business, and that's going to require cash. And so he set a very specific theme around life begins at 40. And the goal was very precise. Not that we want to make more money, but precisely we want to add 40,000 in more margin every month for the next 3 months, which would give him an extra $500,000 for the year. So he put up, as you can see with our example here, created a nice visual, had this put up in all of the garbage trucks and around the offices. And most importantly, he, like Mark Zuckerberg, got on message. Every single day it was driven around the question, what can you do to help us get the extra 40,000? What can you do? What can you do? What can you do? And it was this constant repetition around this one idea. Well, sure enough, in 90 days they did it. They generated an extra 120,000 in margin. And then what did he do? They knew the boundaries, had the core values. They then wanted, importantly, share in the state, piece of the outcome. And so he took 40,000 of the 120,000 and he spread it around his 60 employees as a nice, roughly 700 bonus, and then threw them a great party. All right, wow, it worked. So what do you do next? What's the next step? Well, he looked at his own situation, the company, and he realized even at 60 employees, they were starting to feel focused around function instead of actually getting the work done. In fact, there was a lot of tension inside the organization. Coming out of the recession, sales wanted to land certain clients, but the folks over in finance didn't want to extend them credit, and it created a lot of tension between those two departments. As sales is just trying to grab any revenue they can, they weren't being particular about where it was located and causing the guys driving the trucks to have to go way out of their way and fight traffic possibly to get that commercial customer they had signed up. So a lot of tension between the various functions. And so Gene realized where the first one was really working on process and the P&L, he now needed to work on the people side. He needed to get his team working together again as one. And so he created a theme called 180 to 1. Now, where did the 180 come from? Again, he didn't say, hey guys, would everybody work better as a team? Look, we need to know specifically the measurable outcome so we can keep score. He said, here's what I want us to specifically do. Every employee is to work one day in a job share with someone from another department per month for the next 3 months. So 60 employees, 1 day a month, times 3 months. We're going to do 180 job sharing days. I want finance to go out with the salespeople and see what they're facing. Salespeople, I want you to ride on those garbage trucks. And that's what he was on every single day. His question was, what have you done to, job share? What did you learn? How many days have we got for the quarter achieved? And sure enough, at the end of the 90 days, they hit the 180. And again, through a big celebration and party, and more importantly, felt like now his team was ready with the additional cash, working together as one to scale up this business. Third quarter. And by the way, he put up some beautiful posters, again, to remind folks of the particular theme. Now it was time to come up with the next step. And as luck would have it, he's walking by his assistant's desk, and he needed her to do something urgently, and she was constrained. And what was the constraint? She was working through this very complex Excel spreadsheet. He realized it was one that he had assigned to her to start back in the Great Recession, tracking literally at a time when they were robbing Peter to pay Paul, that he had not looked at now for the last 2.5 years. But she had not had the courage to really bring it up to Gene. Why was she still needing to do this? And he realized that if she was scared and maybe doing stuff that didn't make sense and afraid to mention something, how many other employees were in the same situation? So his third quarter theme was called Bin It, and right there you'll see on the screen, there was his question. If it's wasting time, energy, money, or space, let's get rid of it. And for the next 90 days, they focused on that diligently, actually created new language within the company that still exists today, giving people the freedom to tell the king they have no clothes on, to tell Gene that we're doing stuff that doesn't make sense. By the way, the result, they cleared out about 25% of their time, which improved their capacity without having to add any headcount and continue to save them additional money. Now, they have continued to figure out the constraint and focus on it every 90 days since. I'll give you an update here in 2015. They realized that they had not focused enough on dynamic pricing. That why do we have a fixed price for every same account when we know every account's not the same? And so they put a theme together called The Price is Right, drove on it for 90 days, and the result was they were able to increase the average revenue per customer by 7%, which is significant in an environment where everyone is still quite price sensitive in Ireland. Now, along the way, give you the latest update. They ended up finding the right who, a major private waste management company out of Dubai, doing about $350 million a year in revenue that they've now hooked up with. And Gene is in the process of crushing what was that million customer, big, hairy, audacious goal he had set in 2012. And so there's the key. Set the big, hairy, audacious goal. Don't worry too much about what happens in between. And then get crystal clear. What is the constraint? What's the rock that's in my way getting up that mountain? And then put a theme around it. And if everybody knows the rules, knows the score, knows obviously what is the finish line, and then has a fun stake in the outcome, if nothing else, a fun party to celebrate the win or to commiserate if we lost, that's how you gamify the company. Now, let's say you don't want to do all that fancy stuff that Gene does. I mean, you look at those charts and you're thinking, wow, how do I start with something that looks that great? Look, to give you another example, maybe one that's not as fancy as what Gene has done, I want to take you to Jim Tobin at Ignite Social Media. And he was sitting in our workshop at the end of November, and he was wrestling with what is this constraint. He had 28 employees. They were a kind of social media company. And they had just put in a new project management system to kind of keep track of all the projects that they were taking on. And the system was telling them that they had all of these laid and unassigned tasks that he knew wasn't true. It just meant nobody was using the system. And I know that's never happened to any of you. You've, in your company, put in a new system, a CRM or whatever, and no one's using it. And so Jim said, look, we've got a month till the end of the year. Why wait for the next quarter? Let's get on this now. And so he used one of the most important management tools ever created, and that is the whiteboard. And he goes back, and in their break room, he puts up a very simple whiteboard, as you see here on the screen. And he wrote simply late 241, unassigned 728. Now, nothing fancy. He did use 2 different colors, which I think was good. And then he put out a very simple note to the 28 employees. Hey, we've got a new project management system, and I don't think any of you guys have noticed. It's saying we've got all these late and unassigned tasks. If you could get that to 0 by the end of the year in a month, that would be great. That was it. Nothing fancy, nothing highly motivating. And he was blown away that within 24 hours, in fact, he said, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't have believed it. He took a photo of it and sent it to me, why it's on the screen as you see it and in the Scaling Up book. In 24 hours, his lates had dropped by 25% and his unassigns in half. And you know the rest of the story. By the end of the month, he was able to get that down to 0. He got everyone using the project management system. And in the next 4 years, he was able to quadruple the size of the company. Now, he wouldn't sit here to say that was solely the reason why, but that was the most important next step. That if he hadn't got that accomplished, he's pretty convinced he wouldn't have got all the next set of initiatives accomplished that allowed him to achieve that kind of significant growth. So now we've defined what is the top of the vision summary. We've now looked at kind of how you think through how to break this down, particularly to quarterly priorities to move the organization forward. What you're going to do then, and we're going to describe this later in detail, the bottom third, is that's then when you sit down with every employee and every team and you say, all right, what is it that you can do to help us move this organization forward?